Hello, budding web designers. Today we are going to talk about generating your images for your website. So we're going to look at the File Generate Image Assets element in Photoshop. Presumably we have your mockup done, and what we can do with this is we can label every layer with a suitable extension and retitle it in proper web naming conventions, so no spaces or special characters. So and then we turn on this image assets generator, and actually it'll save the picture for us, the layer for us as an image. And it'll do that with every layer or every layer set, depending on how we want that to happen. And it's really a wonderful thing. Saves a lot of time and work, since you don't have to generate and save every image individually. You still can. You could take any image and save it as a Jpeg or a PNG or a GIF, with the regular Save As window in Photoshop, but this actually is a good time saver. So there is an article on Canvas. It's on the Adobe Help site, and it's all about all the different things you can do with this image asset generator in terms of naming layers so that they generate specific images. So let's take a quick look at it. All right, so first of all, let me turn my layers on because that's super important here, and turn off this title. All right, here's my mockup. I have some links on the left and some links on the right, and everything basically is on its own layer. Like there's this picture in the center that's part of a layer set. I'm still working on the type a little bit. Like this is pretty much the type as it came out of the box, but I want to add some highlights to it to make it more like doughy to fit my design concept. So keep that in mind. So I've already started this process. The way this works is, let's start at the top here. So I have this heading, and I've titled it sdheading.png. PNG is a PNG file is a certain type of file that supports transparency in a very nice way, and I want to see this cutting board through this image, and I want the cutting board to be flexible, so that we're not at the point where we can do responsive images just yet. But what I can do with even something like this, that's fairly easy, is to have it against a background that's flexible. So the cutting board will basically fill up the whole browser. So I'm actually going to export that separately, so that I have a little bit more control over it. Because this image, if I go to my image size, just to show you where we're starting, it's 1200 pixels by 750 pixels. It's a very conservative, small size as a good starting point for this project. So on a large monitor, these graphics will look pretty small, and they'll be surrounded by, in my case, a lot of cutting board. And it'll still look okay because the cutting board, like I said, will fill the browser screen. But I will want a higher resolution image on the cutting board. So in fact, you know what? We'll hit that in a minute. Okay, so I've already started this process of generating image assets by appending retitling my layers so that they make sense as image files. So I have this is my sourdough heading.png, sd-heading png. Then I have the subheading, which will change. There'll be different subheadings based on what, I'll tell them what they're doing, remind them what they're doing. Although I might put a little pretzel icon next to it on the stage. I have this whole folder here. That's everything in the center. I did a little bit of masking, and there's some adjustment layers in there. So what I did with this, instead of retitling the individual layers, because I don't want individual files, I want this whole group of pieces, you can see when I turn it on and off, to be a single image. I've called it prepstuff.png. Then I also have this pretzel drawing. Let's go ahead and do that one. So if I want that to be an image, what I can do is retitle it with no spaces. And this one also will be a PNG because it's transparent. I don't want the pretzel picture. It's a pretzel picture that I used to sort of draw over. It was like a template, so I don't want that as an image. So I'm not going to retitle that. I have some external links over on this side, and I've started to retitle those. So baking soda.png, I can call this one sea salt.png. Now these could be text-based, but because we're talking about images first, what we're going to do is start with these as images, and I'm going to show you how I can make these text links instead of image links. This paper background is something we're going to actually put in as a background image via CSS, so that we'll be able to put text in front of it or images in front of it. But that will be a special and very important little lesson there when we add these images into Dreamweaver. Notice I haven't retitled flour, water, sourdough starter yet, or the word ingredients. I'm going to start generating these things, and then we'll see how that works. This paper background, again, is the paper layer, plus it has levels adjustment layer. So I put that in a layer set. I just shift-clicked it and said, new group from layers. So it all ended up in the same folder, and then I retitled that folder. So, and it's called paper -bg for background.png, and .pg is just what I called it. You can type background, you can do whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want, just so long as it doesn't have any spaces and it has a .png or .jpeg or whatever. Step links. So I'm going to redo this one in a second. For now, I'm just going to call this mix. Okay. So these guys over here haven't been done yet. So what have I done? Well, here's what's great. Before I do this, before I turn on this image generator, it's right here. This generate image assets. You can see it doesn't have a check mark next to it, so it's not turned on right now. But let me show you what I have set up over here on my desktop. Here's my sourdough project 1. This is my wireframe that I created that we're going to put all these images in. And it's also my local site folder that I've defined in Dreamweaver already when I made my wireframe. Right? Remember, we made an external style sheet, so it's in there, as well as my index.html, which is my wireframe. That was one of the video lessons from last week. Okay. Also, the file that I'm working with now is in this folder called Photoshop Website Files. It's pretzel mockup to PSD. All right. It is not in my local root folder or my local site folder because it's a PSD file, and it's not something that is going to go on a web page. You can't put a PSD file on a web page unless you're going to have someone download it or something. All right, so it's in a separate file. I'm going to have to do some file management after I've exported my images. There's ways to set it up so that your exported assets could go right into your local root folder, but I want you guys to organize them by hand. I think that'll actually be healthier in the long run. So what does that mean? So let's do this. Let's just go ahead and turn on our file generate image assets. All I did was turn that on. Haven't done anything else yet. But let's go back to that folder I just showed you and see if anything happened. So notice there's a new folder in here. It's called Pretzel Mockup 2 Assets. And when I click the little expand button, there's already now a whole bunch of pictures in here. They're my graphics. Everything I gave an extension to, that was a layer set. Remember, there were 3 or 4 different layers within this layer set. They all got generated as a single PNG. This gray area actually is transparency. There's my pretzel, also has transparency. It had I actually meant to have that white stuff around it. It's supposed to look like flour. There's my header, there's my sea salt, there's my subheading. All right, so every layer that I put an extension on and use, I make sure you use your correct naming conventions because those layer titles will be the file titles. So I'm going to go do a few more of these, and then what we're going to do is move these because they're not in our local root folder. If I started dragging them into my website now, I'd totally be messing stuff up. So I'm going to make an images folder within my local root folder, and we'll move those into there. But we're going to generate the rest of them first. I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to keep this window open even. And we'll go back to Photoshop, and let's try a few more. In fact, you know what we could probably do? I don't know if we have very much room for this, but I'm going to try to put this window back here so we can see the files at least. All right, yeah, you can see that in the background. Okay, so let's take this this button rise over here. I'm going to turn my toolbar off. It's literally the word rise right here. And I don't have a graphic for that yet because it's just called rise, but my image generator is still on. I have not turned it off. If I put rise PNG here and I hit return, it pops into this list. The second I put that extension on there, let's do shape. We will shape our pretzels. This is the fun step in pretzel making. Well, eating them is the funnest, but shaping is pretty fun. Maybe not that fun. Shape.png. And look what happened. We get shape.png. Now, Photoshop knows that it's supposed to be a PNG. If I change my mind and said, oh, you know what, let's make this a JPEG. Now, this would not be a good JPEG because it's going to have a background if I do that. But just to show you what happens, notice that the shape PNG went away, and now we have shape JPEG. And look, it has a white bounding box. That is the default bounding box. So that would look really awful if that was sitting here with a white bounding box in my Dreamweaver layout, you know. Ridiculously bad. I want to see the cutting board through it. So clearly, let's go back to PNG. You know, and here's the great thing. If you're new to this, which we all are, well, you all are, you can actually put a comma, and I could actually add another graphic. Like, what if I don't know if I want a PNG or JPEG? I can do that. What happens there? I get two graphics over here. I have a shape and a shape. There's my shape JPEG with the white bounding box. There's my shape PNG, which is transparent, so it'll look really nice against my cutting board. I can do all kinds of things, and so it's super important that y'all read. There's an article on Canvas from the Adobe Help people, and it lists all the layer naming conventions that you can use to generate very specific kinds of graphics. For example, I'm going to do one more on this layer. I'll just double click it, put another comma, put a space, and say 50% space shape. We'll call this one SM for small. You know what, I'll just write the word small. Small dot PNG. Okay, what's going to happen there? This will generate a PNG that's half size, 50% of the size as my original. And I had to give it a second name because I don't want to overwrite. I can't have two files with the same name, right? So I had to give it a second name, which is shape small. So when I hit return, it's going to generate that one as well. Now, this will be super important later on when we start to do responsive websites. So look over here now. There's this shape small. So we have three shape headings. There's our shape small, which you can tell is 50% of this original ping. So there's the original, there's the one I typed in to be 50%, you can tell it worked. There's the JPEG in the middle, which we're going to get rid of because that's going to be useless. All right, so no matter what I do, as long as I just need to make sure I follow the exact correct naming convention. Let's see if there's still a space in there. And it'll generate the two that I want. See, the JPEG one went away now. I didn't even have to delete it. It just went away. So now I have two options for my PNG. So I took the JPEG out of there. It's amazing. It's super, super great. I can't explain how much time this saves. For all the graphics on my website, they have 4 versions of every graphic. For there's a high quality one, there's one for mobile devices, there's one for iPads, there's one sort of in the middle there for small monitors, desktop monitors, one for large desktop monitors. So, and there's, you know, probably 200 or 300 graphics on my website. So imagine that multiplied by 4, we're talking over 1,000 graphics. All I had to do with each single graphic was put on, you know, the title, the size, you know, 50%, 75%. You can even type in the exact pixel dimensions that you want your file to be. Again, just check the article on Canvas. And I'll show you how to do that. You can actually append things to the end of them. Like if I wanted to call this one bake.jpg, and I wanted this saved at a higher quality than the defaults, which put it right in the center, I could say, you know what, save it as a JPEG at 90%. And what we get is, now this is 90% is not at the beginning. Here, notice on my shape layer, I put 50% space shape, and it generated a graphic at half the size. This one, I put the 90% after the JPEG, and over here, I have this baked JPEG, and it's a JPEG. I did that on purpose, just to show you it will have that bounding box, except bake was really my boil layer. I just realized I had a mess up there. Yep, so it's supposed to be called boil. I duplicated my layer, and so I didn't have to keep formatting things. So let's just retitle it boil. So now I have one called boil, JPEG, and you can't tell, but it was saved at 90%. All right, so what I would do with all these guys when I'm done, so I would just have to go through this whole thing, and also I should save this. Because it'll save all my new not my new titles. I generally turn this image asset generator on at the end after I've created my whole, all my layers, and I would have put in all of my graphics that will go on every page. I would just swap them all out. I have the pretzel drawing. I basically have 2 of them done. They would all just be stacked on layers up here. I would need one for my mixing, one for my rising, one for my shaping, etc. So I need different layers for all those graphics, but I could export them all from here. It doesn't matter where I put them in Photoshop, that if they're overlaid each other here, they won't be overlaid. If they're on their own layers, they'll export as individual graphics in this. Okay, so here's what's super important. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off now, so it doesn't generate anything more. Minimize this, and do a little bit of organization. So again, the default place that these assets are all saved is wherever you have your file that you're working with, your PSD file. And again, because this was not something I needed in my local site folder, I left it in another folder. I always have a companion folder for every website I do that says like raw materials or starting images or something like that before I prep them all. So they're all in here, and notice this title of this folder is the same title as I have here, except it says assets instead of .psd. All right, that's a long folder title. I don't want that folder title. I'm going to go to my sourdough project and just make an images folder. That's much better. And then I'm going to take all these guys, I'm just going to shift click them all and put them in here. All right, so when I open Dreamweaver and it opens my site, it'll see all those pictures. But I'm going to put one more in there as well, just because I wanted to show you one more thing here. Okay, so besides, this time we can use the whole screen. There are other ways we can save a document. And one of the ways is your old school way of just doing save as and picking JPEG or PNG or GIF. But there's also this file export save for web. So we'll do this twice, just the old school way first of all. So I have my cutting board, I can say file, save as, and pick JPEG down here in my drop down because I know this will be, I don't need any transparency in here. JPEG will be great for a large image. Go to my desktop, go to my local root folder, sourdough project, go to my images folder and save it right into there, but I need to use no spaces in there. And then click save. And somewhere right here in the middle, 6 is good for my JPEG options. I don't want a large file. I don't want, I could probably even go a little bit smaller there if I wanted to. As I pull this down, I get a smaller file, which, requires less bandwidth, but it's going to be not as good looking. Okay, so I saved as a JPEG. Let me show you one more option there. This is not a very complicated graphic, so any photograph you can save as a JPEG and sort of just pick out your compression. But there is one other way to do this, and like I said, it's this file, export, save for web, legacy. And legacy just means that probably eventually Photoshop won't support it anymore, but for now, a bunch of web designers use it, and I think it's really healthy for you guys to see because it shows you a lot about the image formats. So I'm going to turn, I'm going to leave this title on for a minute. So we'll have a second document, and this background will actually have this thing attached to it. Because I think you'll be able to see with this text a little bit better how this works. So if I just wanted, first of all, if I just wanted the cutting board, I would turn this off. But we're going to leave this on just so we can see it in the preview. So we can do export, save for web, legacy, and this is a little slower, I've noticed. Well, okay, not quite that slow. But I'm going to click 2 up. It's going to show me my original, and then it's going to show me whatever options I pick here. So I can say, oh, you know what? I want to do a GIF. And it'll show me like a color table. And you can tell already. Let me zoom out, actually. So you can see I did command minus on my keyboard to zoom out. Let's do a different color table. Let's do like 2 colors. Okay, so tell the quality falls down. If I'm only allowed to use 2 colors as a GIF image because it gives me a color table, as you see, basically I just get a tan box. It won't show me all those beautiful tones in my cutting board and the wood grain or anything like that because it just can't possibly do that in 2 colors. So like GIFs, you can see with 8 colors, I start to see the banding again of the wood grain. If I go up really high to like 256 colors, everything looks pretty cool, except it's a little gritty because you just can't, a photograph has millions of colors in it. So the best option for this one is actually JPEG, as I showed you before, just because JPEG is the best for photographs that don't need any transparency or anything. But the beauty of using this dialog box is you can see the options that go with something. Like you can tell there's no color table because this spot is empty. And it doesn't give me a chance to change the color table up here. But with the GIF, it did. It gives me the color table, lets me change the option. So it gives you the different options that you have for each individual thing, and you can see the original compared to the new one. It also shows you ping. If I pick ping, you'd see that I have the option to have transparency. Ooh, this one's taking a second for the preview. Once it switches to the PNG elements, you'll see the transparency is one of the options. Some other things that we have in here. There's little play buttons down here. If I picked a GIF and I wanted to make an animated GIF, and I had a timeline that went with it with different states for that animated GIF, I could play it and watch it and change the timing a little bit and change the number of times it loops right down here, all kinds of stuff. It clearly doesn't want to switch into there we go, ping 24. So ping 24 has a transparency option, which is default for our ping 24. And you can see that the ping 24 looks really quite nice compared to the original 2. But here's the downfall for the ping 24. It's a giant file, 83 seconds. Okay, so you can click I have this set for like if your user was using a cable modem. For their network. And this gives you a good indication, like if you were at school on one of the network things, it'd be a lot faster. But still, it's a giant document. All right, so that's telling me, that's a horrible choice because who wants to wait that long? As opposed to like JPEG Low, where it's 2 seconds. So 42 seconds to 2 seconds. So these are great sort of indicators. They really, they don't tell you everything, but they are good in terms of like showing you the relative merits of using one over the other in terms of your download time. That's all down here in the corner. So we're sticking with JPEG, and you know what? Low quality looks totally fine. It's going to be a background image. No one's going to look too hard, but I can't really even see the difference between the two. If I blew it up, I could, but I'm not going to need to blow it up that much. So from here, I could just click Save. Again, I'll go in my local root folder. I'm going to call this Cutting Board 2 and click Save. That one, of course, will have the type on it, so I won't actually use that one because I don't want that in the background of my sourdough pretzel stuff. I meant to zoom in on the type in that little demo, but I forgot. So, oh well. Again, one last thing. Read the article on Canvas. It's, again, an Adobe Help article. It lists every single way you could change the layer name to work with your asset generator to save whatever kind of file you need to. Again, maybe save is the right word, to generate any file you need to, since you don't actually have to save it, which is the whole beauty of the asset generator. Okay, that is all. In the next lesson, we are going to drop all these images into our wireframe in Dreamweaver. See you then.